Peace, 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 family. It is so good to have you all here with us today. We are presenting the Pentecost series, The New Wave. And today we are talking all about neurodiversity. My name is Reverend Yanni. I am the Peace Pastor. And I am the founder of My Super with the A, My Super Natural Life. And we're all about providing holistic communal care to folks with disabilities via coaching, creativity, and community. So for the past year, our educational programming has been rolling out. We're doing the work of launching an ASL Institute very, very soon. And we're also doing the work of building the foundation to onboard our coaches and our spiritual caregivers at this time to support all of us as we move through some very challenging times. And so I want to thank New Church Ministry for partnering with me to make this thing happen. Neurodiversity is something that we all need to be talking about and uncovering and researching, both as it relates to our personal experiences and as it relates to those in our communities, in our families, and in the world. So quickly, I just wanted to give a definition, right? And there are quite a few different definitions out there around what neurodiversity is. But simply put, the range of differences in individual brain function and behavioral traits regarded as part of normal variation in the human population. Neurodiversity is the idea that neurological variations are known and valued as any other human variation, and so we must honor them. We don't want to think about these diversities and these differences as deficits, rather something to explore, something to celebrate as a part of our human condition and reality. So I'm going to get a little more into that around neurodiversity, but at this time, wanted to welcome my dear brother, colleague, friend, mentor, everything, to the proverbial stage with me. Terrell, how are you?
I am fantastic. So excited to be here. So excited that we are partnering to do this series, the New Wave Pentecost series. It is everything. So I appreciate this opportunity to be all those things in your life and the role that you play in my life. So thank you.
That's
And all
right.
the people that you continue to impact. So you're the truth. We appreciate you.
Awesome. And even just thinking about the last New Wave we did was all about ASL and expanding our care through ASL. So I'm giving thanks for our interpreter here today, right, as we try to remain consistent in our accessibility, right, and how we reach our people in this season. So I wanted to ask, right? What uh in your heart, right? In your heart, and maybe even in your mind, right, wanted us to do this today, right? Like, what was that urge, that desire, that like push to make this happen today?
Absolutely. New Church Ministry, part of what we recognize is we have a relationship with Pentecost, the miracle of Pentecost that happened, that event for the church, the birthing of the church, because we are partners in the birthing of collectives and churches and congregations today. So we really heavily relate to the idea of Pentecost. And there are many miracles that came out of the idea of what took place that day, leading up to that day, and the effects of that day. One of which is the miracle of communication. As a result of what took place during that day, many people could hear the gospel, and that miracle needs to carry on. We're still serving God of miracles, and so the miracle today is, how do we think about everyone getting the gospel in the way in which they communicate? Which means for some, we are not able to communicate verbally, we need to use our hands. For others, communication has a lot to do with the way in which I receive information and the way I'm able to deliver information. And that's where the idea of neurodiversity in all the many ways, not stigmatizing and say you have an issue, but you actually have a beautiful way in which you communicate, and and trying to find ways for us as the community of God to be sensitive and aware of that difference is really who we should be as people of Pentecost.
Absolutely. And I love that this idea around the beginning of the church, right? The beginning of all of us coming together, right? Because I talk a lot about, I do this in the streets, sometimes underneath the steeple. Rather talk the talk, but the young ones watch the walk. See, they're crawling in the dark, but my voice, it is the torch, right? So we got to make sure this isn't just going to the Jews, right? We want to reach the Gentiles, right? We want to reach people of the world, right? In this very big and global and larger than life kind of way in this season. So
Absolutely. You
I
know,
love
we have to ask ourselves as churches, like, is the way that we have church set up, where people have to come into our edifice, has to sit there for 20 minutes to 2 hours
yeah,
and receive this message that's given by the professional, is that the best or the only way or the most superlative way to communicate the gospel?
yeah,
And the Bible demonstrates that there's many, many ways in which this may be done. We as a church have to catch up and be relevant and recognize what is important for how we do that. And that may not always be under the steeple. That may be in different ways, and recognizing that people communicate differently, be it their generational difference, their
yep.
neurological difference, whatever they may be.
Absolutely. And so here we are on Zoom today, making this whole moment happen. As I think about that, everybody that has registered and is on the webinar, please drop into the chat where you're signing on from, maybe your church, maybe your organization. We need to know where you're signing on from, because we are trying to take this message to all the world, right? That it's not even just about broadening the table, but we want to make sure everybody has their own table. Everybody gets to kick back, right? And just experience the love of God and community. So, bro, I wanted to take it a little deeper, right? So if I talk about my own experience, when I was healing through chronic kidney disease, I actually lost some cognitive ability. And I realized it as I was matriculating through seminary, right? It was a struggle for me sometimes. And even later on, we'll hear about this term masking, but masking around how we try to like hide, what's coming up for us in all of these very real ways. And so I'm wondering, have you witnessed maybe in your family, in the environment, in the community? You work with so many people around the world, right? What's been coming up? What's been coming up?
Yeah, this topic hits me in a personal way, that I've never actually spoken about publicly.
Wow.
One of which is the fact that when I was married, my wife and at least two of my kids were operating, been diagnosed with ADHD.
Hmm.
So we that from our youngest child, from our oldest child getting it when he was very small, and having to like go through school with the EIP and the programs that were necessary in order for him to be included equitably within his learning and education,
Yeah.
knowing how to do that, knowing how that affected her and my relationship, knowing how that impacted the way in which we were able to deal with timelines and getting out the door and paying attention. Just like all these things were all stuff that we had to fumble through
Yeah.
before we actually got the right type of awareness and counseling and things like that to put those things into place to understand what it was like to be in relationship with someone with this type of peculiarity, this type of and I don't say peculiar as though it's weird. That's what I mean. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
yeah, as though with their difference.
Hmm.
And so that was one side, but the other side is a lot of times, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, which means image is like super important to us, right? So this idea of masking is probably something I've had to build up over
Yeah.
time, because the reality for me is I have pretty significant memory loss, which has not served me as a pastor, because the reality is I don't remember people's faces and I don't remember people's names. I don't remember events. I have huge blocks of my past that are completely gone.
Yeah.
When other people talk about their childhood, I have no recollection of the majority of my childhood. And it's just, I don't remember much. So I have all these mnemonics and these things in place to help me um, reach information when I need it,
Yeah.
because my brain is not reliable to recall upon it. When I've talked to doctors, they say this is not something that could actually be um, treated through therapy or medicines or
Yep.
anything like this. This is just kind of the way your brain is. And so I've achieved, I've done what I needed to do to put forth this guise of success. But most people don't realize the incredible amount of energy that gets put into remembering very small details from my day-to-day achievement.
And could you imagine, right? Had you had this information at a young age, at a younger age, even, right?
Right.
And the tools be set in place for you to navigate well in the midst of it all, right? Even in terms of like family planning, or even when it comes to the children in school,
Yes.
and them being labeled or whatever, right? What
Yeah.
would it look like if we said, look, this is normal. We got to figure all of this out. We've got to navigate well. It's not about a cure, right? It's about setting things up so that people have access, like you said, to the information.
Yeah, that's very good because I look back at why I was such a poor student in some way. I found ways to make A's, but it wasn't because I actually knew that material.
Yeah.
Because I was a horrible test taker. I took the SAT 6 times before I could actually be admitted into college.
Yeah.
Went in to go to engineering school. So there was a lot that I put in place. But when I became a pastor, I did try to build our collective in a way that was sensitive towards this, probably in way without the acknowledgement of doing so intentionally. But one of the things was we were not going to sit and listen to a sermon and spectate a sermon for an hour. We were
No.
very discussion oriented. If you have a question, don't hold it, ask now.
Yes.
It's too much to sometimes just hold a question in your head while also paying attention. And sometimes you can't move past that question to get the understanding and listen to what else is being said. So,
Right.
very, very engaged. We were very, physical and intimate and small on purpose because I felt like that was necessary for the efficacy of of the way in which we needed to be able to do so. So really putting a lot of intentionality and understanding that there are many ways that
Man.
people communicate and
Yep.
receive a message.
Absolutely. And I love that. I love that idea of interactive, right? Making it make sense. And here we go, right? So if we want to make sure we capture folks in that quality amount of time, right? My last question for you, bro, is if you could give us three ways, right? Based off of your family life, based off of your own personal experiences, based off of what you're seeing everywhere you go around the world, right? Give us three quick ways that we can make the world a more accessible place, more accessible place.
Okay, let's see what I got here. First of all, become self-aware. Know yourself. And before you try to work on fixing someone else or all of that, like know yourself. Know, do the personality tests, do all of the things that you need to do to be able to look in the mirror and say, this is who I am. Number two, communicate.
Yeah.
Communicate very effectively about this is who I am, this is what I need. And a part of communication is not just saying, but also listening. So being able to hear, pay attention and affirm the needs of other people in the way in which they may be able to do. And then third would be like, stay stay innovative, stay adaptable.
Yeah.
When something's not the whole part of innovation says that, okay, this is what we're going to try, and we're going to pay attention to how that's working. And then when it's not working, or what some people call failing, when it's not working, then we will take that data and put it in and figure out how to do it differently. Don't just keep doing something because that's the way you've always done it. Do something new, do something different, because people are changing, everybody's different, and we have to be willing to do whatever it takes to get the gospel until the end of the earth.
That's it, y'all. You heard it from Terrell. We got to be self aware. We got to communicate. We got to innovate. All right? Look,
All right,
when
love
I
you,
look
sis.
at it, I believe it.
Yes,
I love you so
absolutely.
much. Thank you so much for engaging in this conversation and for allowing this to go forth, right, to all the world on this very special platform. I love
Pleasure.
you and I thank
Love you
God
too.
for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you, Alicia. All right, y'all. As we keep this thing moving, I wonder, y'all, I wonder how many times you've been working, right? For any of the youth, how many times you've been doing that math problem, that math equation. I wonder, folks that, maybe have been in the elderly homes, the nursing homes, right? And you've kind of just been sitting and, a lot of times when I think about my mind and my mental capacity, I just think about getting up and taking a walk and the way that that can create so much clarity within my body, within my mind, within my experience. And so, family, as we think about these differences coming up in our minds, sometimes we just got to get up, move our bodies, and take a walk, take a walk, take a walk. So, everyone, after today, get up, take your family out, go for a nice little walk, see what you observe, see what you hear, see how you feel, tap into that self awareness, tap into that communal love, right? And tap into shifting your energy. So, at this time, I wanted to invite a new friend up, Raul. Raul, if we could bring Raul up. I would love to see Raul's face at this time. Our next guest coming to talk to us about neurodiversity and how this impacts our lives in some very, very real ways. So, Raul, hello, how are you? Welcome to the new wave.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Reverend Yanni, for having me on here, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to be here with you all this afternoon. Before I begin, let me share my screen, and because I have a special PowerPoint to share with you all today.
Yes, take it away. Thank you.
Oh, oh, real quick, can someone please give me uh, accessibility to share my screen? Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, can everybody see that? Okay, great. So yeah, so good afternoon, everybody. Today, I was invited to speak on neurodiversity for a first-hand perspective, where I'll be talking about what neurodiversity is from my experience, as well as give some ideas as to how you, the viewers, can move forward with advancing neurodiversity. So yeah, so my name is Raul Munoz. I'm an organizer for a grassroots organization called Los Angeles Neurodiversity. I'm also a neurodiversity consultant, where I will give speeches and presentations to, to different nonprofits, corporations, or schools, or even churches. Yeah, wherever possible that that um, that can benefit from our knowledge, the neurodiversity knowledge from our organization. And yeah, and I'm also an autistic change agent. So I'm neurodiverse myself, and I also do, yeah, I'm also heavily involved in working with other people, neurodiverse people, in my day-to-day life as a vocational counselor for a state agency, and I'm involved with a couple of boards as well, serving the neurodiverse community. And I also have a master's in social work from USC, and so I'm really proud of that. And so yes. Oh, and before I proceed, I just want to share a disclaimer that my views is not a substitute for medical advice, and doesn't constitute the practice of any medicine or any other mental health profession. So if you need any medical advice, I encourage you to always consult with a doctor, as well as seek the appropriate necessary mental health counseling if warranted. All right, with that being said, yeah, let us begin. So yeah, so neurodiversity, this was a term first coined by Australian sociologist Judy Singer in 1998. Yeah, as Reverend Yanni was mentioning earlier, yeah, neurodiversity is a recognition that diverse neurological conditions are the result of normal variations in the human genome. So yeah, that includes the acceptance of various kinds of brain cells or mindsets. So different kinds of differences can include autism, ADHD, cerebral palsy, learning differences, as well as any other kinds of differences as well. And so, yeah, so all of this, the whole idea of neurodiversity is for yeah, society as a whole to be able to understand, accept, and help include this population wherever possible. So why does it matter? It matters because, yeah, oftentimes there's not enough equity of access for neurodiverse populations or neurodiverse people. So here I have a quote here that says that we can't afford to waste a brain. To meet the unforeseeable challenges facing towards us in the 21st century, we will need many kinds of minds working together. And that's by author Steve Silberman. He's really involved with, especially in neurodiversity advocacy. He wrote a book called Neurotribes back in 2015 that talks about the importance of neurodiversity and why it's needed. And so oftentimes in society, there's talks about diversity and equality, and there's different I also understand there's also like different marginalized groups or groups that have been historically oppressed, and for the neurodiverse population, it's no different. So when it comes to the neurodiverse population, due to a lack of understanding or due to lack of awareness and acceptance, people can go through experiences like loss of employment opportunities, loss of school opportunities, not enough accommodations in whatever it is that they're trying to access. And so by trying to make things more equal, as well as providing equity, providing those supports to neurodiverse individuals, that is what's going to help our population to be more included. And and I'm also really grateful for the opportunity of presenting here as well. Yes, because I too personally believe that neurodiverse people are also people of God, and they also deserve the same treatment, respect, and support to be able to access whatever services or whatever messages that you all wish to share. And at the same time, it also helps neurodiverse people to feel more included in their communities, which will then lead to more them living more productive lives. So, what are some ways to start the conversation? So this can include things like promoting neurodiversity acceptance in your communities, organizations, and churches. So pretty much what this can look like is that it can look like as simple as making a public service announcement acknowledging the acceptance of disability and neurodiversity. Oh, and fun fact, July is especially known as Disability Pride Month. And so if you haven't gotten a chance to do this in your organization or church already, feel free to acknowledge this in your particular group or community. And you might never know who in your community will appreciate that. Because yeah, due to stigma, a lot of neurodiverse people will also stay quiet due to fears of being rejected or being treated as differently. So yeah, so a public message like that would be really helpful, or even doing a fundraiser or making merchandise that promotes positive messaging about neurodiversity. Quick example of how that could look like is making little bracelets like this. If you can see what I'm holding up right in my camera right now, I'm holding a bracelet that my organization LAN created, and this bracelet says simply says autism rocks, because yes, that's a good amount of our members within LAN are autistic, and so we wanted to really acknowledge that. And yeah, that also helps to promote that acceptance within us and within my organization as well. Another thing that your community can help to do is also help organize neurodiverse support groups. So for me personally, this is what's also helped me to be more embracing of my own differences. Because to tell you the truth, there was once a time where I wasn't always embracing of my differences until I discovered an autistic adult support group about 7 years ago here in Los Angeles. And yeah, the more that I participated in that, the more I became involved and became really empowered, to the point where, yeah, I eventually then wanted to be an organizer of an organization like Los Angeles Neurodiversity, a group that serves neurodiverse people, is also neurodiverse led. And yeah, within LAN, we also help to organize neurodiverse support groups as well as really helpful information and workshops. And third is having honest dialogue with your neurodiverse loved ones. This can possibly be uncomfortable or difficult for many, but it's really, at the same time, it's also really important to be able to do this for your loved one. For those who, yeah, especially if you're a parent and if you have a child that's neurodiverse, and if he or she doesn't know that they're neurodiverse, yeah, it can be especially helpful for you to be able to sit down with them and tell him or her what his differences are, how it may impact them or her. At the same time, also be sure to include what strengths he can also bring as well, and that he or she can still be a really capable, intelligent, and amazing individual. And fourth is also offering accommodations wherever possible. So yeah, different neurodiverse differences are gonna need different accommodations. For some, it might require extra breaks or even a quiet room. And so wherever possible, if you're especially organizing an event or a meeting, and if you know of someone, a neurodiverse person that needs like certain accommodations or has struggles accessing something, either in your community or church, yeah, be sure to reach out to that individual and ask them how you can best support them. Now, before I wrap up, I just want to share with you all 3 important key points to remember to be an ally. So the first thing is definitely respect. Neurodiverse people deserve respect just as any other person. They also seek to be understood. And yeah, I cannot emphasize that enough. Like having that understanding is what will help the individual to also be able to open up. Yeah, without that understanding, it can lead to like people becoming withdrawn or not living up to their fullest potential. And so, yeah, yes, especially if you see them struggling with something or doing a certain task, yeah, try to offer that understanding to them so that they can then be able to know that you value them and that you want to support them. And yeah, third most important is validation. So the validation of all of us being humans is also really key, so that that person can feel that they're somebody and that they're worthy beings just like any other person. And there's other many positive traits as well, but these are definitely the three key points to remember, most certainly. Now, I know that you may have questions for me, and there'll be time for questions towards the end of this event. But in the time being, if you have any like further questions, if you want to connect with me, that you can definitely connect with me in the avenues that I have listed here on Facebook, Instagram, email, or phone number here. Other than that, I thank you all for the opportunity for me to speak with you all. Have a wonderful and blessed day. And yeah, looking forward to connecting with you all soon. Thank you.
Yes, Raul, thank you so much for being here with us and for that beautiful presentation. I thank you, I thank you, I thank you. And also for the 3 points at the end. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you and I honor your work in the world. Thank you for hanging out until the end.
Of
All
course.
right.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon. At this
Absolutely.
time, family, one of the guests that I knew needed to present today wasn't able to be here in person, but thankful for this virtual reality. We actually got to record a video, and now we're actually going to present that so that you all can engage with our third guest before our final guest, and then some quick question and answers. Thank you all for being here with the new wave, Neurodiversity, brought to you by my super natural life and new church ministry. All right, family, family, family. I invited a special guest to be here with us today. As you all know, Clubhouse is on and popping these days, networking on all manners of things. And so, friend, I wanted you to introduce yourself. Let the people know who you are, the work you've been up to in the world. This today is the new wave, Neurodiversity, presented by myself, Reverend Yanni Davis, my supernatural life and new church ministry from the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Buddy, who are you? Tell us everything we need to know. Name, pronouns, work in the world, school, everything.
Got it. Got it. Well, I just want to say thank you for inviting me, first of all. And so, hi, I'm Benani, and I am a student, feels like a lifelong student, as well as a researcher and an academic activist. Most recently, I received my master's in autism spectrum disorders and will be getting my clinical psychology doctorate, starting that program in the fall at Saybrook University. Really what inspired me to get into this work was when I was working as a lead classroom teacher in New York. I was a performing arts teacher, dance. And I found that all the students that I just love the most, because teachers lie when they say they don't, right, were students who had labels or were not, you know, who didn't necessarily excel in the academic classrooms when they came here because they had the space to really be themselves and be authentic. I really found myself drawn to. And so I sought out opportunities to work specifically with that community. And it led me to work with a an organization that creates play spaces for children with extreme disabilities. And then I just sort of went head in into that work and went on into work with another play space. And while I was there, I was seeing how, unlike schools, when kids are on a playground, it is a much more low stakes environment for kids to be able to engage with others that communicate, play, socialize differently from them. But I wasn't seeing these two groups of people playing together. It was either, we would have to like clear out the space because the parents felt like the children who maybe had more extreme disabilities need the space themselves. And then the typically children would, play on their own. And I was like, this isn't right. This is really parents putting their own ideas about the ways in which children can engage onto their children. And so I went back to school, and my idea was to come up with a program that would basically teach neurotypical children how to communicate, play, and engage with their neurodistinct peers. And we can go into what neurodistinct is later. But
Okay.
yeah, but from that, I got my degree during COVID. And so when I was going to go out to the schools and do this program, what launched the same time was Clubhouse. And so I actually ended up morphing my work of, really finding ways to create spaces that allowed others to feel authentic and to feel cared for and nourished. And I took those same principles that I was really, putting into the work for children. Never in my career would I thought that I would be interested in working with adults. But when I came to Clubhouse, I saw that there was a need for adults who needed support. And so so I created this ongoing room every day for about 2 hours called Neurodistinct Women Check-ins.
Yes.
And this was a space that catered for women identified people, trans, cis, non-binary, who are neurodistinct. And so what's neurodistinct? You may have heard of the term neurodivergent. Have you heard of that term? Yeah, it's a pretty well-known term. And the issue with that term is the divergent part. Because when we're talking about groups of people, as soon as we begin to label them with something, if the word itself already points out a difference, it's already othering. And so while the neurodistinct community is sort of finding their way, we each learn the ways in which even our language and the way that we call ourselves is so important. So when you say neurodistinct, what you're really talking about is distinct sensory, cognitive, thinking, processing that is unique. And so that's the population that I was working with. And neurodistinct can be anyone from undiagnosed or diagnosed autism, as well as ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, as well as PTSD, and any social personality disorders like schizophrenia or bipolar. Because what a lot of people don't realize, and then also post-traumatic brain injury, because a lot of people don't realize that not every neurodistinction or neurodivergence, which is a common term, is it's not just all autism and ADHD. This spans a wide number and groups of people. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, even hear you talk, it's a lot like the mission of my supernatural life, right? At first, I had this idea of creating these spaces where folks with disabilities, folks with chronic conditions could come and experience these supernatural summit days. And then all of a sudden, boom, we have to launch in the midst of a pandemic. And so now we're creating these spaces virtually for folks to engage in these conversations, right? To talk about some of these conditions that are coming up, right? But not in a stigmatized way, right? Divergent. I mean, how? Almost degrading or life depleting of a term, when in fact all of our minds function in these very beautiful and different ways. And so diving into this world and wanting to make spaces more accessible and to start these conversations, I'm like, well, here we are. We got to do it online. And so thank you so much for your
Yeah.
work. I mean, I've seen the influence and the impact for sure. And you were the first person, one of the first people I thought about to have you come on today.
Thank
So
you.
as we dive deeper, right, into some of, what's coming up in the youth, what's coming up in adults, what are some ways that like you roll out your work these days, right? So
Yeah.
about this next level in terms of your program, right? What is your heart really, really focused on in this season? Yeah, as you do your work.
Yeah, being in what's called the ivory towers, right? Being in the academy, you can get into what's called like these echo chambers where your
Yeah.
work ends up being only among the academics, right? Or the clinicians. And that's not where it needs to be. And
Yeah.
so, what my work right now really is about making sure not only that the people doing the research are actually a part of the community, right?
Yeah.
Me identifying and being neurodistinct myself, there's a way that I disseminate my information as well. And so right now, the way that I've been doing that is a lot through social media on the
Yeah.
Black Neurodiversity Instagram page. So Black Neurodiversity really came out of the work that I was doing in grad school as well as Clubhouse, because I was seeing that a lot of the people who were either diagnosed or undiagnosed didn't really understand the language, didn't really understand the ways in which certain things can present. Because a lot of the times when we're speaking about autism, when we're speaking about ADHD or dyslexia, any of these things, it can get really gendered and it can get really racialized in a way that's not inclusive of
Yeah.
everyone, right? And so
Yeah.
we don't see ourselves. And so when I created Black Neurodiversity, it was really about providing information in a way that was accessible to the people that who were living that life. So, for
Yeah.
example, I don't know if you've heard of the term masking. Mask,
No, tell me more.
yeah. So masking might as well be its own. I would call it its own pandemic when it comes to neurodiversity, because
Yeah.
of the ways in which neuroableism works. Now
Yeah.
we may understand ableism, right? In the sense that people believe that there's a typical or a normal way of being or acting, right? When we add neuroableism to that, it's the idea that there's a certain way that a brain should work.
Yeah.
There's a normal brain, there's a healthy brain, there's only certain ways that we're allowed to think, right? And a certain ways we're allowed to be. And so what ends up happening with a lot of neurodistinct people is that because a lot of these experiences of disability are really predicated on like social and communication, as you age, you kind of learn to hide and camouflage certain
Yes.
behaviors. And that's called
Absolutely.
masking. And so when I present, even if you give someone the terminology of masking, it opens their eyes because they're like, oh my goodness,
Yep.
wait, yes, that's what I've been doing.
Yep.
This isn't actually how I feel, right? And so then it opens up this whole sort of this world of them really realizing, okay, what is the mask and who am I when I'm unmasking? And that's
Yep.
what I was really able to create in those spaces with neurodistinct women, is a feeling of understanding the ways in which they're masking and the ways in which they can be authentic to their neurodistinct selves.
Wow, very nice. Thank you. Thank you. You've just opened up my eyes and my world to the ways that I've been asking.
Right.
Even as I deal with some PTSD,
Mhm.
from when I had chronic kidney disease. Even as we think about the ivory tower, some PTSD there, in terms of what I went through. Yeah. Wow. Wow. So there are ways that I've been masking, in terms
Yeah.
of my presentation, and even some cognitive loss that I experienced while I was unwell and the body was so full of toxins.
Right.
Um So yeah, I know that some people are going to experience some breakthroughs just after hearing you talk today. And please let us know where to find you. And then I'm going to ask one last question.
Yeah, sure. So I would recommend everyone follow the Black Neurodiversity page. And then my personal is Rhythm is the Ritual. But the Black Neurodiversity page is really where I put a lot of the work that I'm sort of transmuting into like accessible content for our community.
Beautiful. And if you could give us three ways to make the world more accessible to neurodistinct folks, what
Mhm.
would it be? Three ways, three ways.
I would say the first is to have an open mindset as to the ways in which people can communicate. And what I mean by that is that just because for a lot of neurodistinct people, it's an invisible disability, right? And they also, and no one really needs to, no one is needs to tell anyone what their diagnosis is. And so when you're talking to someone and you're noticing that there are uh, differences in the ways they're communicating, having patience and compassion, specifically with communication, will allow that person to feel a lot more comfortable and open in being able to speak to you. So that's what I would say that the first thing is. The second is, you know, a lot I've received a lot of, when I tell people about my own neurodistinction, they'll say, and I know it's out of their they're trying to relate. And it's like, oh, I have a cousin. Oh, I got a little brother. I would advise not to do that. And the reason I would advise not to do that is because when you are meeting one person with a neurodistinction, that is how they are. And while past information may be able to help you in terms of being able to be compassionate and being understanding, really get to learn that individual person just as you would a neurotypical person, right?
Yep.
Just as you would any individual. Because people who experience disability deserve that same time and not to be considered like, oh, you have this label, so now I understand everything, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So yeah, so having an open mindset with communication. And then the second was making sure that you're being like individualizing who that person is and really getting to know that single person. And then I would say the third thing um, is really, take some time to do some research on your own because and I would particularly look at adults who are speaking about their experiences because they will give you a lot of information that say like research and web articles, which really aren't that well informed. And it's based on a lot of information from people who aren't actually experiencing the disability. So when you're going to do your research, only read the information that comes from the lips of the people who are experiencing the disability.
Beautiful. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And that's what this platform, My Supernatural Life, is all about. And so I'm so grateful that you made the time, even in this virtual world, right? To
Yeah.
like connect in this way. I am so grateful. I'm looking forward to the comments in the chat. As the webinar rolls on, I'm going to send them to you.
Oh,
And
yeah,
thank
please.
you for everything, for your work, and just for being the being that you are in the world. I'm so grateful for this time, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Yanni.
Yes, yes, yes. All right, family. I just had to have Ben Oni on. As you can see, a wealth of knowledge, not just in the academy, but from their own personal experience. So much to contribute to the conversation and making the world a more accessible place. As we keep this thing moving, family, talking about the chat. If you all have any questions, any comments, anything you want to add to the conversation, let's drop it in the chat now. We're coming up on our hour, so let's get that in the chat, and our panelists can start thinking about them. But here we go, family. I had to invite my dear friend, my dear sister, my dear colleague, my dear mentor, Andy. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm excited to be here.
So good to have you. Tell us who you are. Tell us about your work in the world. Yes, please.
Awesome. So I'm an embodiment facilitator, I think is the best way to describe what I currently do, but that is influenced by many years of being in the field of therapy and working with children on the autism spectrum, working in classrooms, working in communities, really kind of shaping my way that I understand how we interact with each other. And that work has transitioned now where I work primarily with adults and work in this way of how do we move through things that are often maybe labeled as different.
Yeah.
How do we move through that in this world? So
Yep.
yeah.
And I mean, I'm always intrigued around your educational background. Like some of the things that you've studied has even, made it that our work is more accessible. Just so y'all know, Andy and I work together as coaches in the world, as mentors in the world, as spiritual companions, whatever you want to call it, so many names. And so our education, right, and what we've experienced in the world influences even our work now with folks. So please tell us a little bit about your education and even this program you're in now.
Yeah.
Folks need to know, like we're out here getting this knowledge to provide better care for our people.
Yeah, my background's my master's is in transpersonal counseling psychology with really an emphasis on the somatics and understanding the language that our body speaks, but not just in the terms of our body, but in our sensations, in our smell, our taste, our touch, our sight, our hearing, because we can't assume that those sensations are the same for everyone. And
Right.
so how are we looking and experiencing people in this unique way? And so my master's is in transpersonal counseling psychology, but then I had an emphasis on autism. And so I worked primarily in the field of autism and autism specialty for many years. And then I went on and did some work in the behavior analysis world, which was really interesting, looking at like human behavior and why do we engage in certain behaviors and what needs are we trying to meet in those behaviors. And now I'm studying somatic experiencing, kind of taking it a step further of looking at how does trauma show up in our bodies and how does that trauma then communicate, not so much in the experience itself, but in what wasn't completed in the experience that then shows up later in our lives in different ways. And so really, again, like slowing down and saying, like, what is the language that our body's speaking? And how are we understanding that when we're interacting with one another in all of these different spaces?
Yeah.
And so I think today's conversation, as I've just been listening and have been on since the beginning, is so important because there's all these unique perspectives. And yet when we get to the end and we kind of listen to what those three things are that people are sharing, there's so much overlap and similarity and what each speaker has shared today. So it's been really powerful.
Absolutely. And even hearing you talk, it makes me think of my time working with children with autism and as teaching mindfulness and hip hop, right?
Yeah.
So combining worlds of like mindfulness, that socio-emotional learning, and pairing it with art, right? Pairing it with words, pairing it with these melodies and these realities so that the children could live in an embodied way, right? Could recognize these emotions and these feelings that are coming up that oftentimes are shunned or pushed to the side. You're told not to say that, not to think that, not to do that, not to feel that. And so I love that we get to do this work, and helping people heal and feel through their minds and their experiences, right? We all have different minds. Like, how beautiful is that?
Yeah. Well, as you're saying that, it's making me laugh and reflect. Actually, when I worked in the classroom, when I was in the field, in the educational field, I was a sought out expert. So I would get phone calls from people all over the country. I was living in Wisconsin at the time and then moved to Colorado. But I would get these phone calls from professionals and families all over. Like, I'm like, how did you find me? This was before, I look young, but I'm in my 40s. So this was before, the Facebooks and the MySpace and the
Yep.
Instagrams, and even like the Google search wasn't, people were using it, but like I didn't have those things. And yet these people would reach out to me and I'm like, how in the world did you find me? And, they would ask me these questions like, how are you doing this work? Or how are you, how is this child experiencing this breakthrough with you? I don't understand it. And my classroom looked very different than most of the classrooms because I was like, you need to move your body, you move your body. You need to sit on the floor, you sit on the floor. You don't like the desk, we don't need a desk, It was just like, how can we help you consume the information in a way that is going to make the most sense for you? And so my students would thrive. My classroom from the outside looking in, you would probably say, if they were going to judge it, like, what in the world is happening in there? And yet there was this energetic language that was being spoken between me and my students and my clients where it just, we didn't put anything in a box. It was like, we roll with what we need to roll with today, and what works today might not work tomorrow. And that's okay, because we can be flexible and adapt. And so it's just, as you were saying that, it's making me laugh because I reflect back on that time where, it's really influenced even the way that I work with people now in a totally different genre, you could say, but also like, how are we cultivating spaces where people feel comfortable and safe enough to be? And, we just heard that in the last presentation around like this idea of patience and creating this comforting, safe space for people to be able to be themselves.
Absolutely. And so, Andy, for the sake of time, right, as we think about people's capacities, even, right, their minds and like, wanting to be mindful, right, of the people, right? My last question to you is, based off of the knowledge, right, in the academy you're getting, based off of this work that you've been doing with people all around the world for decades now, right, based off of where you are in your work even, give us three ways we can make the world more accessible, more comfortable, and safer for those folks, those of us with neurological differences. Yeah.
Gosh, I've been thinking about this as I've been listening to everybody talk, and I'm just going to go back to the three things that came up for me right away at the beginning. And I think the first one is like really being proactive in the way in which we operate in the world. And so I'm always thinking, there is never an assumption that when people enter my space that the space is going to be set up for them. So I'm constantly thinking, how can I create spaces where people will feel safe and speaking to it? Maybe you need to move your body. Maybe you need to sit in a chair. Maybe you need to take a break. Maybe you need to stretch. Maybe you need to lay down, and like just setting the invitation and setting that permission for people, because sometimes people won't ask for what they need. And sometimes people don't necessarily know either. So I think that's the first one, is like really thinking, how are we setting up our spaces in a proactive way so that we don't always have to come from a reactive place if something does arise. So that was number one. Yes. I think the second thing is being flexible and adaptable and being willing to accept feedback. That feedback doesn't necessarily mean you've done something wrong. So for me, as someone who facilitates spaces, feedback doesn't have to become something personal. It doesn't have to be like, oh my gosh, I messed up, right? And I think sometimes that can be hard, right, when we're in a facilitating role. And so for me, feedback is an opportunity to say, how can I be flexible and move forward and create some adaptability in my spaces?
Yes.
And then I think the third one kind of goes hand in hand, being open to the conversation, and also what Terrell said at the beginning, knowing ourselves. So where do I need to maybe deepen my knowledge or deepen my understanding or ask questions, or not assume that I know everything just because I have the degree or I read the book or I went to the training or I went to the seminar, but that we learn best by asking questions to people, to each other. And I think that for me, that's been the most important thing, is that just because I've trained or have this experience doesn't mean that I know the answer. So communication, asking questions, being flexible, accepting feedback, and being proactive.
I love it. Thank you so much, Andy, for your wisdom, for your knowledge, for being here today,
You're
and for
welcome.
being a resource, of healing for the people. I appreciate you, and I give thanks for you.
I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, family, our hour is upon us. If anyone has any questions, please drop them in the chat. We'll make sure we get them to our panelists so that you can get the answers that you need. I want to thank you all for being here at My Supernatural Life Presents Neurodiversity, the new wave neurodiversity. Family, the conversation has started, but we definitely have to keep it going. I don't know, maybe we'll have a part two. Maybe we'll have a part two. This is needed. This is necessary. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. We've got respect. We've got communication. We've got love. We've got compassion. All right, family? We've got all of these things on our side. And let's do our good research and our good work to make the world a more loving and accessible place. Be peace, know peace, live peace. Reverend Yanni out. And you can find us at mysupernaturallife.org. Peace, family.